All right, that's the cue that we are going to get started. So again, welcome to everybody. Thank you all again so much for joining us on today's webinar. From everyone on David's team, we just really want to extend our gratitude for you committing to spend this time with us today. As many of you may already know, I see we have return visitors. David has more than 40 years of experience as a family therapist, workshop facilitator, lecturer, and advisor to leadership executives from all over the world. David is a best-selling author and respected thought leader in the leadership community. He is so incredibly passionate about helping people connect with the most authentic version of themselves and seeing the world transform one authentic person at a time. Whether he's leading an academy, hosting a webinar, speaking in front of a crowd, or sharing through his written words, David is so fulfilled by the work he does. Today's webinar topic is one that I think that many of us can relate to, whether personally or on our teams. Today, David will share some insights on mental fatigue and some strategies to help us ground ourselves and guide our teams amid all of the chaos. This webinar, as well as all past webinars, are recorded and are available on David's YouTube channel. So I will post that link in the chat room if you'd like to go back and revisit another webinar or share today's webinar with a friend or a colleague. So again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's always inspiring and encouraging to see leaders committed to growing and learning and showing up as the most authentic versions of themselves. So without further ado, here's David.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I just have to say, Kristen, I know you come from Edmonton, so we are, and for all of you Oiler fans on the phone, on the line this morning, let's give a cheer for Oilers tonight. Unfortunately, I come from Calgary area, but it's hard not to get behind these guys. Anyway, pleasure to be here. I just say a couple of things. And Kristen, thank you always for your energy and your passion kicking this thing off. You truly are appreciated here. I was a little reluctant, to be honest with you, to hold a seminar on mental fatigue and who wants to come together. I was worried who would want to come together and talk about being tired. But I have noticed something in my work. That everywhere I go, there's a sense of people being depleted. And I don't think we really talk about it very much. We might complain a little bit about it, but I don't think it's seen as legitimate that we can actually come and talk about being tired. I think we pathologize it and say there's something wrong with us, and it's kind of a badge of honor to grind through and not show any vulnerability in terms of tiredness. But so if you're not feeling a sense of depletion, I'm pretty sure that somebody on your team is. And so you'll get some insights today around your own well-being and focusing on fatigue, and also some insights on how to support those that you serve and love in your life. And the other thing I want to say is that it's a little ironic that I'm giving this presentation, this webinar, in the midst of my own fatigue. So many of you know that we're in the middle of our house is up for sale. Val and I spent the winter really evaluating our own values and said, listen, we don't need a 3,200 square foot house anymore. Our kids are launched. We want to simplify our life. And it's the end of an era. And we've been purging the last 6 weeks and just really letting go of stuff and just really evaluating what's really important and what matters in our life. But I'll tell you, this week, our house went live on the market. We've had, I think, 8 showings in the last couple of days. We got 2 open houses this weekend. My daughter's due to have a baby next week, and I'm starting a university class that's due on Monday. So we have a full life right now. And to be honest with you, I'm a little exhausted. So I just have to tell you, I'm really just giving this presentation for me today. If you happen to get some benefit from it, then that's bonus. But I'm really just speaking to myself today. I'm really appreciative of being able to prepare this presentation. So my whole take is on this, that there are times in our lives when we're on narrow roads, and at those times we're fools if we try to maintain our usual speed. We've got to slow down. And one of the main purposes for coming together is just to have us slow down for an hour. I'm going to talk for an hour, and then I'm going to be, as usual, I'll be on the phone for half an hour for those who can stay later on the hour. Stay later for some good dialogue and questions and answers as we reflect on this material. But my main purpose today is have us just take an hour to slow down and connect with ourselves. We're out of connection. We're out of tune and out of rhythm with our own internal soulful rhythm, as I would suggest. Folks, it's important to understand that this thing of depletion is in season. We're in seasons. We don't really listen to our own internal seasons. This is not a linear thing. This is a seasonal, it's a cyclical process that we go through periods of disruption, depletion. We need periods of rest in our life and periods of refocusing and renewal. In a production-oriented culture that's oriented toward being driven by the clock, we tend not to assume that it's okay to have lots of other seasons. It's okay not to be okay. We're pressured, I think, in our society to always be on the focusing side and the renewal side and the harvesting side. And that's not the nature of life. So if we've been through some disruption, or if we're in the middle of disruption, we need a sense of community to share some of that anger that can come up with disruption: fear, sadness, loneliness, self-doubt, insecurity, or excitement. Who do you have to share that with? And I've noticed something since the pandemic. We went through it, those years of disruption, and I'm not sure that we've fully healed yet from the planetary disruption that we're under. And when we start to get depleted, I think there's a sense of clarity and boundaries that's required here. And I'm going to spend some time really focusing on these strategies and dig more deeply. We're going to do three things today. The path, I'm going to say it's not the path, it's a path to well-being. There are many paths to well-being in times of mental fatigue. But I'm going to offer to you three key principles. We're going to talk about appreciation, not to pathologize fatigue, but to listen to it and appreciate that it's there for a reason, that we all get fatigued from time to time. It's a season that we're all in, and it means that you're doing something useful in the world. If you never get fatigued, I would wonder if you're ever actually doing anything important in the world. So we're going to get tired from time to time. But I think it's important that we first of all appreciate it. All of my work is centered around the notion of compassion and appreciation rather than judgment and forcing ourselves to be somewhere that we're not. This is about appreciating ourselves for where we're at today, and pay attention. If you want well-being, it starts with appreciation for wherever we are. Acceptance, as I say, is the answer to all of our problems. Accept where you're at today, and then you can work with it. We're going to talk about an assessment process to really dig deeply into what does it mean to be tired. It's interesting, the path out of tiredness is to really understand precisely what's causing the tiredness. If you go into a doctor's office with a stomach ache, you really have to, the doctor will assess, first of all, why is it there? What's going on? What's the root? And simply by saying that you're tired really isn't, it's a little bit like walking around saying that you're depressed. Just do a poll sometimes. How many people care about how tired you are? Do you care how tired I am? Do you care how tired? It's not something that we really care about because it really doesn't mean anything. It just creates negative energy that kind of brings you more tired. You can get tired of being tired, right? You can get tired of complaining, and you can get tired of hearing other people complain. So I'm going to dig deeply and really have you assess, what does fatigue actually mean? And I don't think we're very skilled. Certainly in our culture, the English language is not very expressive at understanding all of the different meanings of the word tired. So we're going to just dig a little more deeply in that. And then we're going to leave you with an action plan for how do you move out of this in a very practical way. All right, let's talk about appreciation. First of all, fatigue is not your enemy, it's your indicator. All of us, I think many of us, pay more attention to the energy on our phone and making sure that our phone is being recharged than recharging ourselves. But when you see that energy light, that red light on your phone, you don't throw the phone out and you don't judge the phone for being bad. You just say, okay, it needs energy. It needs to be restored. And so it's a matter of paying attention and listening. I really want to be clear that I'm not pathologizing tiredness or fatigue. It's an indicator that something's going on in your life. Pardon me. And it's important to pay attention to it and to really be aware of how do we recharge ourselves. So here are some fatigue indicators. There's physical symptoms, there's cognitive symptoms, there's emotional symptoms, and there's behavioral symptoms. And I just want to very briefly go through these. Headaches, stomach aches, intestinal issues, frequent illness, if your immune system is decreased, changes in appetite and sleep patterns, cognitive symptoms, impaired judgment, concentration, reduced decision-making, reduced alertness, attention, and vigilance. Emotional symptoms, irritability, mood swings, lower motivation, cynicism, detachment, where you just detach from any meaning in your life, prolonged self-doubt, depersonalization, you have a loss of meaning, or behavior symptoms, increased errors in judgment, decreased communication skills, insomnia. It's a fascinating paradox that when you're often fatigued is when you have the most difficult time sleeping, when you need the sleep the most. Reduced performance. So just stop and just do a very quick assessment of yourself and say, are you experiencing some of these prolonged symptoms? And the key here is to recognize that depletion is a season, and it's when we get stuck in one season that creates some mental health challenges. It's okay not to be okay, but what do you do with those symptoms? Do you just react to them, or do you really listen? Because those symptoms are telling you something. They're the indicator on your cell phone. They're the red line on your cell phone to say something is off, something is depleted. Now, here's some common reactions to being tired, right? What we tend to do when we're tired is we drink coffee. We come to work and, we're tired at 10 o'clock in the morning and we just take an energy drink or we take caffeine. We complain about it. We get a hit off of complaining about it. Walk around and complain and see how many people care how tired you are. We get on the internet. We get on television. We eat. I don't know how many of you have come home at the end of the night exhausted and you eat. We turn to alcohol. We turn to drama binging, where we binge drama. We're drama in the office or drama on TV or drama in the news, or we just stay busy and we don't listen to it. Now, is there anything wrong with any of those responses? No, they're inherently fine. The key here is to ask yourself, to be intentional and mindful. What is behind the choices? And the question becomes, am I using those choices to distract or to deepen? And when you're tired, there's an opportunity to deepen your life, which is by delving more deeply into understanding the fatigue versus distracting yourself by deflecting away from what the real issue is. We have a culture where it's very human. There's a human tendency that we distract, and it's much easier to distract than it is to deepen. So by resisting doing those things, it means that you have an opportunity to deepen. And I'm going to offer to you another alternative besides these common reactions to tiredness. But I also want to say that why should you care? And you only need to care if you're aligned with some of my purpose and values. So my purpose is to help people connect with their true nature and express it consciously in their work and their life. This is the purpose in my own life. So if you want to connect with your true nature, you will rob yourself of an opportunity. Tiredness is an opportunity to connect with your true nature. But if you distract and deflect and escape from what's really going on, you miss an opportunity to connect with what I call your authentic self, your true nature. The authentic way is that you don't need to change yourself. You need to come home to yourself. And this changes everything. And when you're feeling a sense of fatigue, there's an opportunity to actually, like all experiences in life, there's an opportunity to use that fatigue to connect with yourself if you'll slow down and pay attention rather than just go with the natural human tendency, which is to deflect and to distract and to escape. Authenticity is your greatest source of energy, fulfillment, and satisfaction and impact in your life. And this is where you truly find meaning and purpose in your life. Becoming who you truly are requires the greatest amount of awareness and change and makes the greatest amount of impact. So appreciate that you're going to get depleted and that you need to recharge your inner batteries and have a process for doing that. So that's the appreciation side. Now I want to talk about the assessment side and to begin to understand what is the root cause of tiredness. Until 10 to 15 years ago, it was unavoidable that time and again throughout the day, it was just you alone with your thoughts. While in line at the pharmacy, waiting for the elevator, walking the dog, commuting to work, at the gym, we've banished all of that. We're on our devices. I estimated up to 6 years of our life. We spend a good part of our life looking down at our devices. And we're constantly on this move and we're constantly getting stimulation and we're not connecting with this deeper side of ourselves. We can't have well-being without a connection to ourself. Beware the barrenness of a busy life. Now, why would Socrates, this is a human condition. I don't think it's just a postmodern condition. Why would Socrates call busyness a barrenness? And that's a question to reflect on. This stuff has been around for a long time, this notion of disconnection with your soul, with your authentic self. It's an old and ironic habit of human beings to run faster when we've lost our way. So I want to just break this down. I want to give you an anatomy of fatigue, becoming an expert in assessing your own energy. If you're going to understand how to have well-being these days, you have to be an expert in your own energy. And by the way, if you want to be a leader today and be an impactful leader, you have to understand the nature of energy. How does energy work? I don't believe it's about time management today. I think it's about energy management. How are we managing the energy in the people in our lives and our own energy, beginning with our own, right? So we have a typical curve that says energy on one side and effort on the other side. Now there's intuitively, it kind of would make sense that the graph would look like this, that we start off in high energy, and the more effort we put into something, we decrease our energy as we put in more effort. But the research doesn't support this. One would think that effort is what's causing low energy, but that's actually not what's supported in the research. It's like life force. Children, if you want to have a high energy, just hang around children, right? We have this thing called life force, this energy. And one would think, okay, we have high energy when we start our life. And then as our life progresses, we have decreased energy. But that's not how the research will support this. How many of you have ever met an 80-year-old with more energy than an 8-year-old? And somehow or other, I want to be around people whose life force actually increases with age. And it doesn't mean they're not putting energy into that doesn't mean they're not putting effort into their life. What you'll find, by the way, when people move into retirement, if you do nothing, your life force will start to drop off. That's what we know. You want to keep yourself energized. You keep contributing. You keep giving. You keep putting effort. But there's a difference. There's an awareness of what kind of effort we're talking about. My grandfather, this was my grandfather in the age of 96, could stand on his head. And as Mae West would say, the great actress, it's not the men in my life that count, it's the life in my men, right? So how do you work with your energy? This is a very important question to ask yourself during the course of your lifetime. So in fact, what it ultimately looks like is it's more like a bell curve. That if you don't put any effort into your life, you're not going to have energy. And I can attest to this from my own experience. I've had 2 major bouts of clinical depression where I have had been weeks in a fetal position. Once was about 30 years ago, and once was about 35 years ago. It was in my early 30s. It was in the 80s, and then again in the mid 90s. I had weeks where I was in a fetal position and could not get off the couch. And I'll tell you, during those weeks, I was absolutely exhausted. However, I wasn't doing anything. There was no effort at all. I was literally just in comatose, absolutely disabled to do any work. And I wasn't doing anything. So I can tell you that what we don't want, and by the way, we don't want to stop putting effort in. I am a big believer in a strenuous life. But what we're after here is an optimal energy zone so that we're optimizing the energy that we use. Now, this is I can tell you this from my athletic background. I was a very competitive runner for 25 years. And I can tell you that what I learned is that and for those of you who exercise routinely, I'll just use exercise as a metaphor, as an example, because it illustrates this notion. But this is physical energy. The same thing applies to emotional energy, to spiritual energy, to mental energy, is to pay attention. When you go, for those of us who exercise regularly, 9 times out of 10, before you go to the gym, before you put your running shoes on and go for a run, there's a chance, 9 times out of 10, there's a chance that you say to yourself, I'm too tired to exercise today. Now, you want to ask yourself, is that your mind or is it your body? And so those of us who exercise regularly understand that you just can't listen to that. If you listen to that, you'd never exercise, because you'll tell yourself, you know what, I really don't feel like I'm just too tired today. And you'll think of 20 reasons why today is not the day to exercise. So no, what you do is, if you're feeling tired, what you do is you put your running shoes on and you go out and you run very slowly. And you go to the gym and you work out with very low weights. You start with a warm up, and you get on, or if you get on the exercise bike, and you do it very slowly. You just tell yourself, you know what, I'm really tired today, so I'm going to take it easy, and I'm just going to do it, but I'm going to show up, but I'm going to do it. Now, within 10 minutes, give yourself 10 minutes. What will happen 9 times out of 10 is that your energy will actually start to increase when you exercise. So you start off slowly and you get energy by the exercise. Now, about 1 out of 10 times, I'm just guessing what the percent, it's a low percentage, but about 1 out of 10 times, it doesn't increase. And a very small amount of time, when you start to exercise and you do it slowly, your energy does not increase. Then you know it's time to shut it down. It is not, you're not in your optimal energy zone. You can't get yourself to the optimal energy zone. And you know that your body needs more rest that day than it does a workout. And there's the odd time when that's the case. And you need to listen to that. Now, you don't need to listen to it, but if you want to live authentically, attune to your body. You see, we're trained to work by the clock. No, I'm going to grind through this. I'm going to push through this. And if you don't listen to that, that's a formula for injury. And it's the same process when you go to work. You might think, I don't really feel like working on this project today, but you just start slowly and your energy will move up most of the time when you're working on a project. Now, some projects will take your energy and some will give your energy. We're going to get to that in a minute. But the goal here is to find what is your optimal energy zone. And what you do is you stretch that energy zone and you live within that energy zone. And when your energy starts to drop, then you know that you need to rest. And that's the natural energy cycle, right? And so you can prolong this energy zone. It's not immediate and then down, it prolongs, but be aware, what does it mean to stay in that energy zone? Now, there are 5 particular specific areas where fatigue can happen. So when you say, I'm tired, that doesn't mean anything. You got to break it down and really ask yourself, if you're going to connect with yourself, what is the root cause of my tiredness? So I'll just break this down through, and we'll just examine each of these individually. Physical tired. First of all, nutrition. Now, we're all unique this way. I have no formula here, but I know for myself that if I eat a pure carbohydrate breakfast, if I ate toast, bagels, waffles for breakfast, and that's all I had, or fruit, that's all I had was carbohydrates, I would be exhausted by 10 o'clock in the morning. I would just have a sugar crash and I wouldn't have any energy. So your nutrition impacts your physical energy, how much sleep you have, Maybe you're just tired because you didn't sleep well last night. Now, all of these areas, by the way, will affect all the other areas. This is one indivisible whole. It's not compartmentalized, but I'm just compartmentalizing as a way of teaching it. How much exercise? Physical exercise. If you get no physical exercise, you will be exhausted. Or you will certainly be prone to getting tired if you're not moving your body. Movement and effort will actually, again, increase your energy. However, if you're over exercising, when you need more rest, you'll have the same symptoms as a person who doesn't exercise. You have the same indicators. And a pure physical workload. Now, I know we got some ranchers and farmers on this call. And if you're out there pounding in fence posts like I did as a kid for 18 hours a day, I don't know if it was 18, but 15 hours a day, you're physically going to be tired. Most of us we're not in a place where we get physical workload. It's more of a mental workload, but that's the physical aspect. The mental is the volume of demands, data, and decisions. We are inundated, folks, with demands. And because we have technology, those demands are so accessible to us that we're just overwhelmed with demands. Now, again, I'm not saying that these are all the causes. What I'd like you to do is, if you're tired today, begin to recognize which of the areas fit for you. I'm giving you a whole gamut, a whole menu here, and you have to decide. I'm asking you to decide for yourself which fits. Data and an overload of data. We have all this technology where now we know if there's a war in Ukraine or in Israel, we will find out within the hour. And the problem is you put the whole planet accessible to us, and we're continually bombarded with news. Most of it is bad news because it's based on wanting to have us be afraid. And I'm not saying don't listen to the news, but with the increase of data that's available to us, that's going to wear us out mentally. Decisions, the amount of decisions. I can tell you, I am mentally tired right now. With all the decisions that we've had to make in the last 6 weeks around our house. If you're just going through change, if you're in the midst of transition, those are going to be causing mental strain and financial strain. As my dad would always say, it's not what you make, it's what you spend. And if you're in a position right now of high debt, that causes mental fatigue. Emotional, maybe you're in the middle of grieving right now. Maybe you've just lost a parent. Maybe you've just lost a loved one. You're maybe in a period of, you're in a lot of fear right now. You're in the middle of a decision that's causing fear. Maybe you're living in a relationship where you have to protect yourself. Maybe it's not a safe relationship emotionally for you, and continue at work or in your personal relationship. And if you're in a relationship where you have to protect yourself all the time, not sure when the next shoe is going to drop. This is why I say that as a positional leader, you need to bring stability to your workplace. If you're not sure about the emotional volatility of the people around you, one of the things I'm finding is when you're a little fatigued, you kind of slur your words a little bit. So have a little grace with me today. And maybe you're caring for somebody and you're just in this thing called what we call compassion fatigue, where we're extending ourselves in a way that's draining ourselves. These are all emotional tiredness indicators. And then social tiredness, which is the impact of social interactions. Now, again, emotional and social are very interconnected, but this can have to do with your personality. For those of us who are introverts, if you're around people all the time and you have a more introverted temperament, it's gonna tire you out. Just like if you're an extrovert, you love to be around people, and you go through the pandemic or you go through periods where you have to be reflective and you're not around, that's going to tire you out. So just your basic nature will will take your energy away, right? This is all energy management. It's not pathologizing anything. It's just managing your energy. Spiritual energy, which is your meaning and purpose in your life and what I call authentic alignment. So just stop and ask yourself, right? Do you have a sense of meaning and purpose in your life? If you're just slogging through life, that's going to be more tiring and exhausting than if you have a sense of well-being. So just take a little inventory and assess within your own mind right now, within your own heart, where is the source of your tiredness? And it may be from 2 or 3 of these. It could be particularly from one, and just begin to notice that, okay? So I just want to speak for a moment about authentic alignment because it's such an important part of my work. It's so foundational in the work that I do around authentic leadership and creating cultures that are aligned authentically. Next time you say that you're tired, ask yourself, is it a good tired or a bad tired? And a good tired means you're aligned with your authentic self. A bad tired, we're all going to be Friday night. We're going to be tired after a week's work. But then you ask yourself, was that a good tired or a bad tired? And any of you who have heard my presentations know that I talk about this ikigai thing. It's a Japanese word for your reason for being, where your gifts and your passions intersect with your contribution. And that's your sweet spot. And when you're in that sweet spot, you really don't get tired. Now, you will get a good tired in that sweet spot, and you still have to rest and get unplugged. As much as you love what you're doing, whether you get it paid for it or not. If you get paid for your work, you call that a vocation. If you don't get paid for your ikigai, we call that an avocation. Both have validity. But even no matter how much you love being in that sweet spot, you still need a rest. But and then you'll recover from your rest. You get a couple of days away and you come back to your ikigai. Bad tired, you never recover from bad tired. You're operating outside of your sweet spot all the time, and it's just slogging. And I don't care how many holidays you have. If you're not aligned authentically, you are not going to find well-being. And I always say, fit people don't fix people. Find people's sweet spot. And we have a very skilled person that's been working with us for the last 3-4 months. And we've been assessing, is there a good fit here? And what we found was this person is absolutely capable of doing the job, but it's not the right time for her. She's in the middle of working with some grief and some personal issues that she's dealing with, and she needs just some time to step away. It's not the right fit for her. And we just really assess that. It's not about changing people. It's not about forcing people. It's about creating an environment where people can find that they fit. And if they can't fit, then you can support them to move on. And this is both a responsibility of your team members as well as for an organization. Gary Zukav said it this way: when the deepest part of you becomes engaged in what you're doing, when what you do serves both yourself and others, when you do not tire on the inside, but seek the sweet satisfaction of your life and your work, what then? Then you know that you're doing what you're meant to be doing. And you're being the person that you're meant to be. So how many times in our years of performance reviews have we ever been asked this question? How's your sweet satisfaction? How's your sense of fulfillment in your work, right? You will not really tire. How many of you have ever been involved in a project that you know was in your sweet spot, and you leave 8 hours, 10 hours later actually more energized? Now, there will be a good tiredness that you need to reflect, but those aren't the kind of tired. That's a different kind of tired than when you go home exhausted working outside of your sweet spot. And so just begin to notice and recognize, again, appreciate what's going on when you go home at night, what's really happening. And these are the energy, what we call energy quadrants. And so quadrant 1 would be where your skill is, but there's no passion. Quadrant 2 is skill and passion. Quadrant 3 is no skill and no passion. And quadrant 4 is no skill, but passion. And you really want to know, Kristen and I were having a conversation before we started here around what her passion is and where her skills lie. And she's really found a role that works for her in the company that she works for. And she contributes on our team on a part-time contractual basis in a way that really works for her. And so what we want to always do around authentic leadership is to create an environment where people can spend more time where their skill and their passion. It's unrealistic to think that, sometimes you just have to roll your sleeves up and do what needs to be done. It's not necessarily your passion, but you want to build. And if you can create a system where you're building on your skill and your passion, you're building on quadrant 2 activities, but you have to, then that will be sustainable. But you have to stop and connect with yourself to know what is your skill and what is your passion. And these are conversations, authentic conversations to have. And then you can map out your authentic energy. So what we have on the vertical axis is short-term satisfaction called happiness. And then on the horizontal axis, we have long-term fulfillment or meaning in our life. And then you can actually map this out. Stimulating is where it gives you short-term satisfaction, but not long-term meaning. Sweet spot is when you get both. Slogging is when you get neither one, and then sacrifice. Now, I can tell you, most of us come from parents or at least grandparents. I can tell you, my father was in the sacrificing. I remember asking my dad once, do you like your job? And he looked at me like I had beans for brains. He said, what does liking my job have to do? My job is to save up enough money that I can pay for your kids' education, your undergraduate education. That's called sacrifice, that going to war, that mentality. Now, I think we need to honor and appreciate and value the sacrifices that have been made for our quality of life today. But I want to say that I think we all understand we don't want to live our whole life in that quadrant. And what I believe about energy is that we need a little bit in all those seasons, that we want to spend a good part of our time in the sweet spot. Hopefully that grows. Maybe that sweet spot's away from work, maybe it's at work, but that we grow that quadrant. But sometimes you've got to slog. Sometimes we just have to sacrifice. I think it's unrealistic to expect that we're going to be in that sweet spot all the time. Okay. So the last thing that I want to finish off with here in the last 20 minutes is that I want to give you a little bit of a path for action and what we can begin to do to actually, okay, you've made some assessments now. What do we do with this? How do we actually create more well-being in the midst of all of this? And I come back to a group of people that I have just utmost love and respect for, and it's holistic managers. These are a group of ranchers and farmers that really came together with a fellow by the name of Alan Savory, probably 40 plus years ago, and talked about regenerative living. And these are ranchers that are committed to ranching and farming practices that will sustain our environment, that will keep our environment restored. And I just love hanging out with these folks and speaking at their conferences and just learning from them. And basically what they teach me is through holistic management is it's not the climate, it's not the amount of rainfall, it's how you manage your land. It's not the environment. It's you work with the environment. And so you can see between two pastures here, a pasture that's been managed holistically and one that's not managed holistically. It's the same climate, but you get different results. And they've taught me a great deal. This is about regenerative agriculture is like regenerative living, to regrow or be renewed, especially when damaged or lost. So, we all go through periods in our life where we go through getting damaged. How do we restore that? And I've learned a lot from this community, and must give Alan and the community. I know we got some people on this call, Don Campbell, I think you're on this call, who have greatly influenced my thinking around this, where it's a thought model where we begin to think differently. And it's my interpretation of it is that you've got to stop and get your bearings. The most important thing you can do from coming to this webinar is to stop and get your bearings. Whenever you've been lost and I've been in the wilderness, when you get lost, the natural tendency is to run faster. The human tendency is to run faster. But what you learn in survival school is you got to stop. And this is what I've learned in holistic management. Stop and get your bearings. Where are you? Where are you? And what I have learned is the most important thing. If you're in a depletion season and you want to restore your life, the most critical idea that you can take away from this is to get clarity. To get clarity in 5 different areas. First of all, to get a clarity around what is the root of we've gone through the assessment process. What's the root of your exhaustion? What's the root cause of your tiredness? Physical, mental, social, emotional, spiritual. What's the root cause? Authentic, right? What's the root cause? So go through that first of all and begin to ask yourself, where's the root cause in that assessment? Secondly, and these 5 areas will impact all the other areas. What are your goals? This is what Val and I did this winter, is we really took some time. We said, listen, we got a 3,200 square foot house. We've been living on this beautiful property that we've been blessed with. and we've had a great quality of life that we've given to our kids. But you know what? We're at the stage in our life where we need to simplify, and we need to really examine our values. And we need to say, where do we want to be in 10 years from now? And what do we want to create in our life? And what do we really want in our life? And to get very clear on what is important to you. And this is the whole authentic path, is it's so easy to be connected to what everybody else thinks we should be. As we say, I think if I can remember this line, we used to spend money on things we didn't need to impress people that we didn't know. So there's this notion of living somebody else's goals or getting very clear. And if we're not careful, all of our access to what people want from us, marketing is so accessible to us that if we're not careful, we can buy into what the culture thinks is important. And my whole message around authenticity is we got to live our own life, including I'm no guru in your life. I'm giving you some structure here, but the whole structure is to guide you to yourself and to really sit still and to step back from what's causing the exhaustion, step back and start to really examine what goals are important. What are your values in life? What do you really value? What would you say would be the 5 most important values of your life? What are your needs? What do you need to support your quality of life? What I learned from the holistic managers is that you define your quality of life first, and then you say, how much production do I have to support that quality of life? Most of us get right into production because this is a production-oriented culture. And we think that bigger is better and that we make this drive toward higher production. And then you wonder what happened to our quality of life. What do we actually need in our life? And then from there, what is our process for recharging our life and really continue to strengthen our life? So I'll break these down a little bit. We could spend a whole webinar on any one of these 5 areas. We could frankly spend a whole day on each of these areas. We get into this in much more detail in the Academy. So let me talk for a second about values. This is what I got from Steve Covey, who took his work from a guy named Charles Hummel. And that is that there's 4 kinds of demands. There's urgent, there's important, there's urgent and important, and there's neither urgent or important. And the important demands are the things that we press on. The urgent demands press on us. And what's happening in our world today is that the urgent is so accessible to us, we lose touch with what's important. And what's important is what sustains our well-being, but you have to honor what is important in your life. Charles Hummel, who wrote a book where Steve Covey caught all of his material from around time management, wrote a book in 1967 called The Tyranny of the Urgent. And what he said is he's the one who really began to understand this difference between the urgent and important. The important task rarely must be done today or even this week. The urgent task calls for instant action. The momentary appeal of these tasks seems irresistible and important, but they devour our energy. If you constantly live your life in alignment with what the urgent is, what people want from you, it will exhaust you. But in the light of time's perspective, their deceptive prominence fades. With the sense of loss, we recall the vital tasks we've pushed aside. We realize we've become slaves to the tyranny of the urgency. And in 1967, long before devices and personal computers, Charles Hummel stated that we are moving into a technology age where the urgent would be so accessible to us. This next generation coming up will be the first generation to forget what matters most collectively more than any other generation ever has. A profound statement that he made in that book, profound prediction. So what we've done is that we can categorize these into different zones. So if it's urgent and not important, that we call that a distraction. Most of us spend most of our energy around necessity, things that are urgent and important. They push on us, and we know that it's important because we like a job, right? But the real fulfillment and energy will come in zone 2, where you begin to sit back and decide what Covey would call what's your big rocks. And I think we all are familiar with this analogy of the big rocks. You got to schedule your big rocks first, and then your urgent will meander around that. And that's the one habit that I got from Covey back in 1978 when I took a class from him, is to put the big rocks into at the beginning of your week and at the beginning of your year. Know what your big rocks are. And then the urgent will meander around. And the definition of an urgent are facets of your life that require at least weekly attention and result in increased energy. So spending time with a loved one is important, but it's not urgent. Taking care of your team, it's important, but it's not urgent. Listening to people, building relationships, taking care of your health, taking care of your faith, whatever your values are what's important. And I can't tell you what's important in your life. That's something I'm just reminding you to step back and connect with what your values are and make those the most important thing. Now, if you want some fascinating reading up on this, I would read Cal Newport's new book called Slow Productivity, or also Greg McEwen's book on essentialism, probably the best books that I have seen on working with energy and time. And what Cal's notion is what he calls time block energy management, and I use the word big rocks. He would call it deep work. And what it means is deep work that's important, that is uninterrupted work. To say, I'm going to put a boundary around this and I'm going to make time for this. And during those times when I'm doing big rocks, emails are in those necessity stage. It's urgent and it's important to respond, but some of those emails are urgent, but they're not important. But those emails are not big rock work unless you're using emails to build relationships, which is a poor tool to build relationships. That's why I'm not a supporter of open door policies. I get that leaders want to be available, unless that is your sole job, is to have an open door and just take care of people. But you got a job to do as well. You have work to do as well as take care of people. So what I like is the notion of what I learned from university professors, which is office hours. So you have time where you're available. You have time that you're out on the floor. You have time when you pick up the phone and connect with people if you're managing remotely, where you have. But notice, what are the big rocks in your life, and schedule those in at the beginning of your week, and make sure that you attend to those big rocks. Those big rocks, by the way, one of the indicators of those big rocks is it's like a little bit like exercise, which would be a big rock, by the way. But you may not feel the energy when you go into it, but you devote that hour and a half, that half an hour, whatever it is, to that work, you'll come out of it energized. And we just need to put boundaries around those big rocks. And you'll find, just like exercise, if you find exercise that you listen carefully to your body, you'll find that moving your body will give you energy. Doing big rock work will give you energy, right? Assess very carefully, what are your needs? And this is where we really need to, again, if you want to live authentically, I really, and even though I find myself guilty of it, I like to not use the word should in my. I'd like to take the word should out of my vocabulary. But if you want to live authentically, really stop and ask yourself, what are your needs? Not your wants. We confuse the two. What is your need for a renewed? Maybe it's a renewed way to care. Maybe you're caring for somebody right now. Maybe it's a troubled kid in your family. Maybe it's a nephew that's got a drug problem. Maybe it's a parent who's dying. Maybe it's somebody in your life who requires care. Maybe you need to examine, what is the way of caring about this in a way that I don't carry it, where I'm walking beside them, but I'm not putting them on my shoulders and taking responsibility for stuff that I don't need. That is a fundamental need. I'm depleting myself at the expense of somebody else. We learned in lifeguarding school years ago when I was a teenager, don't ever put yourself at risk. And we will get drawn into the pain of others. But those of us on this call who are very sensitive and might be around people in some pain, it's easy to carry that, and that will deplete you. What do you need to say no to? Where do you need in your life to set some boundaries? Where do you need to have some space? And I really, you can write the word boundary in there. Where do you need to have some space in your life? Maybe it means getting to appointments 15 minutes early, 10 minutes early, so that you can sit and just have some space to yourself. What do we do with that space? We get to an appointment early and you just watch people in a doctor's office. They'll just pull out their devices. Watch people and wait when they're waiting. They just pull out their devices rather than connecting to yourself. Where do you need to create some space? What feeds you? You might think that what feeds you is processed food at night or processed television watching, but that's different. That might be what you want, but what you really need is a careful inventory. Maybe you need some discipline and more accountability in your life, and maybe you need a community of support and accountability, somebody that will hold your toe to the fire and follow through with what really matters in your life. As I learned on the farm, accountability is the ability to be counted on. Can you count on yourself? What we do know is that being around accountable people is energizing. It'll give your energy. When you make a promise to yourself, you have personal integrity, and to live your life in alignment with your values, you will have personal integrity, and that will boost your well-being and your energy, folks. George Bernard Shaw, the great Irish playwright, said it this way when he was 93. This is the true joy of life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clot of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. Well, this is a guy who understood, be a force of nature. That will be energizing for you. When you know you're living your life in alignment with what you value, rather than just succumbing to the expectations of the culture, you take responsibility for that, and then you're not walking around complaining, because that will drag the energy out of you and everybody else. It's what I call the law of the echo. Whatever we give out will come back to us threefold, tenfold, maybe not right then, but it will eventually come back. Maybe not right away, but it will eventually come back. If you want more energy in your culture, don't expect it, bring it. Find a way for you to have more energy by living your life in alignment with your values and your needs and your deepest purpose. Bring that to your work. If you want more appreciation, get so busy appreciating people that you don't have time to complain about the fact that you're not being appreciated. Be grateful, bring gratitude to your work. Whatever you expect, give it. If you want better customer service, be of service to that guy in the hardware store where you want service. Be of service and just see if you don't get your needs met at the end of the day. So be the change, as Gandhi would say, be the change that you expect in the world. And this is actually will increase one's well-being. Recharging your batteries. How do you need to recharge your batteries? And it all comes, I have had to learn this from my own challenges with mental health and my own challenges with depression and anxiety. I've had to create, and many of you have heard me talk about this. I believe for me, it's foundational, something in your life that's strengthening you every day, mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically strengthens you. And most of the reason why I exercise today is more for my mental health than it is for my physical health. But I just show up and do it. I box, and I have those, many of you know this, I have a good friend that got me through the pandemic, and he's a boxer, and we go over to his basement 2-3 times a week, and we train and we spar. And in his basement, he's got this poster that says, everybody has a plan. This is a Mike Tyson quote, till you get punched in the face. We're all folks going to get punched in the face. And it's what's the strength of getting up from that is required? And my dad would say, who was Canadian gymnastics champion back in the 1940s, used to say, don't pray for the world to get easier. Pray instead for you to get stronger. And he developed a habit. I had polio when I was 4. And he took me downstairs. He never felt sorry for me. He just believed that, you know what, you got to get stronger. That's what you put your focus on. You get stronger. It's been said that a bird sitting on a branch, never afraid of the branch breaking. It's because her trust is not in the branch, but it's in her wings. And this is our work in life, is to be doing something every day that strengthens us, right? So I'm going to just have you reflect on what you would define as your own mental fitness program. I'll give you what mine is. I've had to discover this for myself to take care of my own well-being. What is your own version of a mental fitness program? What inspires, strengthens, and renews you on a consistent basis? And self-care, as I say, self-care is not always comfortable. Self-care isn't just going home and lying in a bathtub. Now, that may be one element of self-care, but self-care is really creating a life that you don't need to escape from. Self-care is feeling good about yourself. And sometimes you just have to say, you know what, it's self-caring to come home. Instead of just binge watching the television, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to get some fresh air. I'm going to be out in the sunlight. I'm going to get some exercise. Or I'm going to read a good book that nourishes me. Or I'm going to call a friend and spend time with a friend. And we need to have a little bit of mental strength to build on mental strength, right? It's that whole notion of sharpening the saw. So my own mental fitness program looks like something like this. These are the elements. It doesn't have to be your mental fitness program, but I've had to develop this out of my own necessity. Daily quiet time. I'm with a community. I have to share every day what's going on for me. To get through this move, I've had to share every day with somebody in my community what my experience has been like. Making sure that I make rest and sleep an important priority in my life. Getting exercise that's non-harming. Being very attentive to what I eat because I know food impacts my energy significantly. Spending time every day with my feet on the ground. A diversified identity so that I know that I'm more than my job. I know that I'm more than a webinar presenter, that I'm more than what I do in my work, that I'm also a father and a husband and a friend and a lover. I have a, just like you don't want to put all your investments in one portfolio, you don't want your identity in just one portfolio. You're very vulnerable when you do that. Daily journaling to just connect with myself and having buffers and boundaries, getting to places early. It just is easier on my nervous system when I'm not rushed. It's not always, can't always control that, but it's one of the things that's really important for me. The other thing that's really important to me is in the midst of change, sustaining your energy has been a great source of strength for me is the serenity prayer, which is God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Basically, what that means is change the changeable, accept the unchangeable, and remove yourself from the unacceptable. And one of the things that I find very helpful is to take out a piece of paper when I'm overwhelmed and consumed by the demands of life, to draw a line down the middle of paper, list on the left-hand side that which I can control, on the right-hand side that which I cannot control. And it is a waste of energy to put time on developing a relationship with the non-negotiable. When I try to change what I call the non-negotiables in my life, part of the indicators of good mental health is to be at peace with the non-negotiables in your life. What are the non-negotiables? The weather, death, and other people's behavior are the three things that I know I'm not going to change in this life. And there's no sense fighting it. It'll consume my energy if I try to change the things that are not changeable in my life. Okay. So folks, a quick call to action. Here's what I want you to leave with. Take responsibility for and be intentional about your own energy management. Be attentive to the energy in your life and how you use energy. What activities take your energy? What consume your energy? What relationships take your energy? Create space in your life to reflect on this material. Be precise about fatigue. When you say you're tired, be precise about exactly what that means. Physical, mental, spiritual, social, emotional. Start tracking your energy. Review the strategies that I've discussed and create a strength building system for yourself, including a community of support. You know, this is a lonely journey, this thing called authenticity, but it cannot be done alone. We need each other. And talk about energy with your team. Go back to your team. Share this material. Talk about, pass along the link to this if for some of your team members weren't able to be here. Talk about what does it mean to how are people's energy? Is it good tired? Is it bad tired? Are we aligning with your authentic self? Start to have the conversation with your team. And I would just invite you to go further with this. Although my daughter's having a baby next week, I think we're going to take a little hiatus over the next, over at least the next month while she recovers from her birth, and gets into the newness of being a parent. And if you want some I just invite you to our podcast. And our next webinar, we're going to take July off. We'll take the summer off, but our next webinar, if you can make a note, and I haven't decided yet what I'm going to talk about, but just make a note that on August 23rd, you're on the database. You will get a note about this. Folks, I am done. I am done with my hour. I know that I gave you kind of a fire hose of material. I hope that this has been helpful for you to reflect on just one thing that I talked about that'll have some value. At this point, I am going to stop sharing. I've stopped recording and stop sharing.